The Daimler Motor Company of Coventry has a clear claim to be regarded as one of the founding fathers of the British motor industry, a claim made all the more remarkable when one considers that the Daimler name is still with us today. Edward VII, when Prince of Wales, took delivery of his first Daimler in 1900, thus forging a connection between the reigning house and the company, which lasted into the 1950s. Because of this royal patronage, the marque enjoyed a particular cachet with society, and a list of customers reads like the pages of Debrett. So, in spite of some early trials and racing successes, Daimler came to be regarded as the transport for elderly dowagers. But nevertheless, a succession of fine, fast, modern cars emerged from the Radford factory, and indeed they still continue to do so today. We shall glance at the history of Daimler, looking at the TG45, the 1655, the 1620, the E20s, the 15s, the straight 8, range of DB18s, the Consort, some conquest variants, the Dart, the DE36, the Empresses, the Majestic, the V8 250. Standing by the running board of this vast TG45 Daimler limousine, I feel dwarfed even by the spare wheel. And I've come along today to talk to Mr. Derek Hunt. And what is the date of the car, Mr. Hunt? It's been around longer than you have, I think.
Sure it has. 1919 is the date that's on it, but there's some doubt whether in fact it was a 1918 model, but it was shown at the 1919 show.
And what is the size of the engine?
7.5 litres, 7.4.
7.4 litres, that's absolutely massive, isn't it? Under that long regal configuration of the bonnet, 7.4 litres.
Yes, given 45 horsepower.
I see, very strange by modern standards. Right. And tell us about the engine, Mr. Hunt. It's a sleeve valve, I believe.
Valve.
What does that mean?
6-cylinder. Each of the cylinders were cast in pairs, which was fairly common to Daimlers until...
Yes, I believe they embraced them quite early in their career, and that they were much preferred by the royal monarch George V.
So I understand.
They supplied cars to 4 English kings, I believe. And I imagine that royalty admired this car because of its silent running.
I suppose it's silent running and the amount of space given over to passengers.
Yes, indeed. I stood by the car and I was amazed at the tick-over and also by the coolness of the radiator.
Yes, it's the common sign of a sleeve valve, a Daimler sleeve valve, was a wisp of smoke from the back.
I see.
And this one is no exception, but very, very quietly tick over.
I see, much superior to poppet valves of the period,
yes,
which would be rather noisy. And how does your family enjoy having you in the role of chauffeur, Mr. Hunt?
Well, it's certainly, they certainly enjoy it, and it certainly was a car that was intended to be chauffeur-driven. As you'll notice, there's no sides to the driver's part of the vehicle. And in fact, there are 27 separate items that should be checked or greased every day before the car is driven.
I
so
see.
It certainly was a full-time job for somebody.
A regal carriage that had to have full-time staff in attendance.
Absolutely.
But it's a most admirable and enviable car. I wish you all the joy of Mr. Hunt.
Thank you
nice
so
to see
much.
you. The nickel-plated headlamps and silver-plated fluted radiator are hallmarks of the Daimler firm. The starting handle reminds us that electric starters were not as reliable then as they are now. The curved scuttle stands proud at the rear of the long bonnet, with side lamps set much further back. The quaintly shaped three-sided rear lamp is a period feature. The horn bulb, the exterior handbrake lever, the opening two-piece windscreen are all strictly functional and reminiscent of the pioneer days of motoring. In those days, little thought was given to the provision of comfort or weather protection for the chauffeur. The instruments and heavy controls were placed for utilitarian convenience rather than aesthetic styling. Style, on the other hand, was a great concern of the aristocratic owners, who rode snugly in the sumptuous brocaded rear compartment, with its buttoned sit-at-your-ease armchair comfort and elegant jump seats, all echoing solid Edwardian values. Such a vehicle would be bought by a motorist of conservative tastes, who was less concerned with dazzling performance and flashy finish than with roominess and durability. This limousine was suitable for use as a town carriage to transport glittering royalty or parties of silk-clad debutantes. Less imposing, but arguably much better looking, is this Doctor's Coupe of 1927. It also has the six-cylinder sleeve valve engine devised by Charles Yale Knight of Wisconsin, USA, which was adopted by Daimler in 1909. But its cubic capacity is only 1872, and its length is only 13 feet 5 inches, as opposed to the 16 feet 10 inches of the larger car. These differences in size perhaps reflect differences in the social positions and financial means of their owners, especially when one compares its petrol consumption of 26 miles per gallon with the 10 miles per gallon of the limousine. This pretty and well-preserved motor car is a Daimler Doctor's Coupe of 1927. It belongs to Mr. Chris Bourne. How do you enjoy driving the car, Mr. Bourne?
Very much. It's not a great performer on the road. It's not a car that you could hurry along, but it's very sedate, it's comfortable, and quite a usable vintage car.
Just the sort of motor car, in fact, that would have been ideal for a doctor in the Yorkshire Dales in the 1920s.
Yes, it could just about climb up any hill in first gear. It's extremely low, but in top gear it's a very flexible engine, and in the part of the country that I come from, in the east of England, it's ideal.
It's a sleeve valve engine, I believe.
Yes.
Not a poppet valve engine.
Very quiet running.
I noticed when I heard it running how quiet it was. I'm intrigued too by the wealth of period detail, by the dicky seat that's buttoned and pleated, and also by the petrol can on the running board and the fire extinguisher. You must be very proud to drive this about. I'm sure it attracts a lot of attention. This Doctor's Coupe is actually recorded as having been used by a general practitioner. One imagines that its watertight leather hood and cozy leather-upholstered interior would have provided convenient transport for its medical owner. The workmanlike instruments are neatly and clearly grouped on an oval panel inset in the dashboard and illuminated by a push-pull dash light. Capacious door pockets were intended perhaps for the transportation of surgical instruments. Solid woodwork and wide opening doors The tail of the car conceals the dicky seat, used perhaps for a return journey by a messenger sent to fetch the physician. The whole car is genteel and purposeful. In a word, professional. A 1620 of 1931 vintage. This is one of the last of the small sleeve valve Daimlers. The reliable but slow revving Silent Knight double sleeve valve engine, invented by Charles Knight and later refined and improved by Dr. Frederick William Lanchester, had served Daimler well since 1909. This smaller saloon had an engine capacity of 2,648 cc and was aimed at the owner-driver market. It has, however, lost none of the firm's traditional well-groomed dignity, and though it may have been the baby of the Daimler range, it was not short on luxurious fittings or smoothness and solidity. When new, the chassis was priced at £550, and prices for the complete saloon started at £675. About 600 of these delectable little cars were built, but few have survived. The future of this particular example is certainly assured, as it has been the subject of a complete body-off restoration, which took almost 18 months to complete. With its respectable top speed of 71 miles per hour and its reasonable petrol consumption of 17 miles per gallon, it is a car which may be used quite well on modern roads. This stately and refined saloon, which belongs to Mr. Peter Preston, is a Daimler 1620. Incredibly enough, he tells me it is one of the last of the small Daimlers. A small Daimler, Peter, it seems a rather large motor to us.
Yes, but it was in 1931 the smallest car that Daimler actually produced. It was available with two chassis lengths, 10 foot 1 inch and 10 foot 4 inch. This car here is on the 10 foot 1 inch chassis with a Mulliner body.
I see, a Mulliner body. And what about the engine, Peter? That's an
Yes.
unusual one by
Yes.
modern standards.
Extremely unusual by modern standards, but it's a sleeve valve engine. No poppet valves at all, no side valves, and was introduced in 1904 by the Daimler company.
They believed it was more silent running than the noisy poppet valve arrangements of the time.
More silent and more reliable.
They used to say there was a haze of oil that followed these motors. Have you found that in today's traffic conditions?
It does, but usually only when the car is cold. This particular engine has been completely refurbished and its oil consumption is very modest.
I see. The interior is absolutely magnificent. We're looking at, I imagine, at a hand-built wooden body, wooden frame body, panelled in steel.
No, we're looking at a hand-built body, certainly, coach-built. It's a Wayman body, which is fabric-topped. When we say fabric, in fact, that is leather, down to the waistline here, and then below that we've got aluminium panels with steel wings.
So this was rather innovative for the time. This was a lightweight body to some
It was
extent.
lightweight, and also the Wayman patents were really designed to avoid drumming in the body.
I see.
So it gave a nice, quiet, silent body.
So the essence was on comfort for the passengers, and the interior is really rather remarkable. We can see this. Just tell us a little about the fittings, if you would.
Yes, inside we have a very unusual companion at the rear with silver-topped scent bottles. I'm not quite sure what their purpose was for.
Possibly cosmetics, a sort of a repair kit for the lady.
Yes, maybe. We have footrests for the rear passengers, which are adjustable to position. And we have a very unusual feature for 31, which is the automatic courtesy lamps by the running boards there.
Yes, and the reclining rear of the front seat, the adjustable rake.
Yes,
very much
indeed.
ahead of its time.
Yes, indeed. But not as easily adjustable as a modern car.
What is the wood? I was looking at the wood. Is it walnut?
Yes, in fact, the door cappings and the dash are solid walnut with burr walnut veneers.
So walnut underneath and more walnut on top.
Yes, and the veneers, if you look at them carefully, are mirror imaged across the car.
So that they match. The grain
They're all
matches
matched,
perfectly.
Yes.
So to make this stately saloon, somebody's gone to a lot of trouble, a lot of craftsmanship.
Indeed.
And I imagine that once presswork came in, presswork was no substitute for this kind of craftsmanship.
No, press work indicates mass production, and mass production
Yes.
takes away the craftsman. And of course it's the craftsman's skill with his traditional materials which gives this kind of quality.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. A most enviable and wonderful car, Mr. Preston.
Thank you very much.
This elegant D-backed limousine, Daimler of 1935, a Daimler 20, is typical of the upper middle class cars of the period. Owned by Mr. Phil Clement, this motor has spent much of its life as a taxi, as a troop transporter, as a workhorse. You must be a very proud owner of this motor, Mr. Clement.
We're very proud. It's a family friend.
And how long have you had the motor?
About 20 years. I think we purchased it in 1967.
And you still use it as everyday transport?
It's been on the road every year since. It's out most weekends.
So it's still a working motor car.
Yeah.
Ironical that it should have been made, perhaps, as transport for the very rich, but it's always had to work for its living. It's never been cosseted in a heated garage or stored in an echoing museum.
Not at all. It's worked very, very hard for its life, this Daimler has, and it's survived it very, very well.
How does the car handle in modern driving conditions?
Not too bad at all. The steering's a bit heavy, that is the problem with it.
Yes.
It gets a little bit tiring after a long way, but it can cope with modern traffic conditions reasonably well. The acceleration's fair for a car of this size and weight.
Yes.
The braking's within reason.
Yes.
Again, we can cope quite reasonably.
Well, you're on the wrong side of the petition because it is a limousine and you're the chauffeur. I hope the directions that come through the telephone in the back are not too authoritarian or too explicit.
Occasionally.
In the absence of built-in carrying capacity for baggage, a luggage grid, which could support a large trunk, was essential if long motoring trips were to be undertaken. Such trunks, as seen here fitted to the LQ3 Daimler 20 limousine, were offered as optional extras and equipped with sliding cases. Though the interior is fitted to the same high Daimler standards, it is noticeable that the front compartment is much less luxuriously upholstered than the rear, as this car was intended to be chauffeur-driven. The pre-selected gear lever is visible on the steering column. The instruments are once again grouped in the center of the dashboard in a legible and orderly arrangement. The side-mounted spare wheel had been moved from the rear of the car. The engine is a monoblock of 2,687 cc, and it has overhead poppet valves. Improved technology and advances in metallurgy meant that cam and tappet action had become much less noisy, so that by 1933, Daimler could produce a conventional six-cylinder engine using the same mushroom valves as its competitors. Made 2 years later, in 1937, this E20 four-seater drop-head tourer is believed to be a unique survivor. It has the same chassis, engine and transmission as the limousine, but is clothed in an elegant coach-built touring body made to special order. Both cars had the underslung worm-drive rear axle, which was much quieter than the straight-cut bevel gears of the time, and which the firm used into the 1950s. From 1932 to 1956, Daimler used the fluid flywheel and Wilson pre-select gear change. Mr. Isaac, you're the fortunate owner of this magnificent E20 Daimler drop-head coupe. Body is a special body by Salmons.
It is, yes, it's a Salmons body with a Tickford hood. You in fact insert the handle into this hole here, and you literally wind the hood.
And the hood winds over.
It says in the handbook that you should take 15 seconds.
Well, I hope you never have to try it on a rainy day. Thank you so much, Mr. The four-speed planetary epicyclic gearbox meant that these cars could be driven at extremely slow speeds and could in fact creep along. This was a feature which was useful when the more formal town cars were used as processional carriages. Of course, a more sporty tourer like the one shown here could, at the other end of the speed range, be propelled along at more than 70 miles per hour. Mr. Clive Hawkins, I believe you're the registrar of the Daimler 15 register.
That's quite right, yes I am, yes.
And this is a Daimler 15 drop-head coupe?
This is my own car. It's a 1935 Daimler 15 with drop-head coupe bodywork by Mulliners of Bordesley Green Road.
Yes. And was this a one-off model, or was this a model that of which Daimler made many?
Daimler's made quite a number of these cars. It was introduced in 1933 and continued with numbers of modifications for many, many years.
So it was quite a modern car. It was, there was something innovatory about it when it was first introduced.
It was a new design to Daimler's when it was introduced, and it was an effort to capture the smaller car market.
As opposed to the large and stately limousines. And very much an owner-driver's car.
Oh, very much so, yes.
What is it like to drive a car like this in today's traffic?
It's very easy. It has a a pre-selected gearbox and fluid flywheel, and it has sufficient power to be able to keep up with modern traffic, although I dare say its performance by present-day standards would be judged as sluggish.
Do you drive it much with the hood down?
Weather permitting, of course.
Well, that's splendid. I only hope we have enough sunshine for you to enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Throughout the 1930s, the 15, like the one shown here, was the best-selling small modern car that helped the company through the recession. The engine size was gradually increased from 1,705 cc in 1933 to 2,522 cc in 1940, with a corresponding power output increase from around 40 brake horsepower to more than 60 brake horsepower at the end of the production run. Daimler managed annual sales figures of about 3,000 for this popular light car. The 15 range was the brainchild and reflected the influence of Lawrence Pomeroy Sr., and in 1933 the cars were priced at a quite reasonable £450. The 1935 drop-head coupe had wind-up windows and a snug-fitting hood, which is comparatively easy to lower and erect. With its 2003 cc long-stroke engine, it was considered quite a lively performer in its time and thought to be rather sporty in appearance. Many 15s were standard saloons, but coupes were styled by Mulliner and Martin Walter. Special styling features were the long sweeping running boards, uncluttered by the side-mounted spare, which had been moved to a new position behind the integral luggage boot, which had a large side opening lid. Also clad in special bodywork constructed by Mulliner, this more streamlined sports saloon has become less formal than the standard saloon. The lines of the four-light body are appealing, and a certain amount of fresh air motoring was facilitated by a fully opening sunshine roof. The engine of this 1937 15 has grown to 2,166 cc, and for the first time Daimler had begun to endow their cars with independent front suspension.
Straight, slim, and proportioned like a piece of sculpture, the long bonnet of this pillarless sportsman's saloon, this Daimler Light Straight 8, hides a very powerful engine, I believe.
That is true. It's 4 litres of 110 brake horsepower and lots of torque.
We're very fortunate in having Mr. George Stapley, who is the secretary of the Daimler Club, to talk to us about his admirable and enviable motor car.
Very kind.
What is the history of the car, Mr. Stapley?
The car was built in 1938 for showing at the London Motor Show on the Vanden Plas stand. Vanden Plas built the body on the Daimler chassis.
I see. So it was a specialist body.
Yes, they built very few of these cars, and it was obviously their pride and joy.
And this was obviously chosen for the motor show for that reason.
I think so.
So it was an exclusive and expensive car.
Very exclusive, very expensive. They built a total of 12 pre-war, and the price was £1,350 in those days.
So that it would be a car for the rich and discerning sportsman.
Definitely.
It's called a pillarless saloon, and when we have the opportunity to look inside the motor, we shall be able to see just what pillarless means. I imagine it's a rather unusual construction.
It certainly is. There's a speciality of Vanden Plas in this country to produce these pillarless saloons.
Yes. All Daimlers are finished to a high standard. We've seen many beautiful ones today, but is the interior of this finished to an even higher standard?
I think it's a very high standard. It uses the best leather in single panels on the seats, a very high quality wool headlining, and beautifully matched walnut veneers.
So it is a work of art as much as a mode of transport.
Yes, I constantly admire the amount of work that went into the car.
And did you find it in this condition?
No, I found it in a barn in Scotland in 1972, under a hole in the roof in the barn, the engine in pieces, the pistons in a shopping bag, and I think I was just in time before it went beyond the point of no return.
But now it is obviously cherished. Have you won awards with the motor car?
Over the years, many awards, yes. But I use it a bit too much to get it to the stage where it will win the very top awards.
So it doesn't spend most of its life in the garage.
Oh no, it gets a lot of use through the summer, and we've used it on quite long distance runs, including a trip to Sweden 3 years ago.
The sight under the bonnet is also magnificent. In fact, there is as much interest in the technical details as there is in the fine finish of the interior, is there not, George?
That is very true. I was fascinated when I was working on the car, the advanced features that they'd thought through as they designed it.
Yes, it looks so beautiful, it looks so right. But I don't see any brake equipment, any servo or any...
No, the car's got a mechanical braking system with a vacuum servo which is concealed under the floor with the vacuum reservoir.
I see. A beautiful and robust engine, but again, is there no pipe to the oil pressure gauge?
No, Daimlers were never worried about oil pressure. All they were concerned with was oil temperature and water temperature.
So they did not consider that a pressure gauge was necessary?
No, you would never see one fitted on any traditional Daimler.
And there is another feature which I've heard so much about on these cars, and that is the automatic chassis lubrication from the engine compartment.
That's correct. We have a reservoir with a small pump which is operated by changes in engine vacuum while the engine is running. And this pumps oil right through the chassis to all the shackles on the suspension, to the kingpins, to the track rod ends, even to the driver's pedal pivots.
So it does away with the grease gun entirely?
Everywhere except one place, the prop shaft.
The prop shaft. It's a most advanced and remarkable design. A thing of beauty and a joy forever, I think.
This prestigious car was Daimler's answer to the Derby Bentley. As we learned from its owner, the car was found in a sorry state and gradually restored to its present condition. Let us look at another light straight 8 in an unrestored condition. It seems incredible that with less than 40,000 miles on the clock, a magnificent machine like this could be neglected and the artistry of engineer and coach builder allowed to become the prey of wasting hours, turning splendor into rust and dust. The sadness of decay hangs over these images. Defunct instruments and the tangled wiring loom litter the floor. But the ravages of time will be slowly but surely reversed. Leather upholstery and fabric trim will be renewed or repaired, where dampness, insects and vermin have done their insidious worst. New headlining material will be ordered and refitted to the original patterns. Metalwork and paintwork are to be replaced and refurbished. Order is to be brought out of chaos, as parts of a jigsaw with many thousands of oddly shaped pieces are slotted back together to form a harmonious picture once more. By using present-day chemical and electronic techniques, along with traditional materials, the designer's vision and the craftsman's skill will be once again seen at their resplendent best. Corrosion is to be eliminated by shot blasting and scarring. Seized parts are to be freed and lubricated. Fragile-looking spokes will be checked and renewed where necessary. Tough modern paints on all running gear and all chassis members will once again defy the elements and prolong the life of this car well into the next century. The witch's cauldron of the plater will rejuvenate the bright work, and the skills of the polisher will bring back its sparkle. Hidden decay will be uncovered, and as shown on the scuttle here, new metal parts will be fabricated and fitted. The structure of the bodywork will be probed and tested so that flaws and weaknesses may be revealed and corrected. Soon at the touch of the starter, this lifeless block will purr with quiet, understated power as electricity flickers to the plugs, whilst oil and petrol, the vital fluids of the automobile, course through its polished arteries. The restoration has been begun at the front of the car, and inch by inch, detail by detail, cleanliness and efficiency are slowly emerging from beneath grime and malfunction. This is a labor of love which must be undertaken with the cheerful dedication of a good workman and the evangelical fervor of a visionary, so that the whole sorry picture may be made once again to resemble the photograph on the original sales brochure. We are looking at the world through the windscreen of a 1949 DB18. By 1938, the little 15 had grown to 2.5 litres, but large expanses of solid wood and a rather heavy old-fashioned three-spoke steering wheel betray its ancestry. Indeed, after 6 years of making staff cars and scout cars, Daimler had simply reissued this model, which they were developing as hostilities began. In 1938 and 1939, Daimler had devised the Dolphin, a sporting variant of the DB18, which did well in competition because of a newly designed head with twin carbs and raised compression ratio, which increased brake horsepower. When the DB18 appeared after World War II, it was equipped with a version of the Dolphin head. It did, however, retain some pre-war features like separate headlamps, upright radiator grille, and the opening windscreen. The semaphore-armed trafficators seem very archaic now. Large white-faced dials for the principal instruments have a distinctly vintage look, whilst the gear selector quadrant looks exactly as it had done for 17 years. The unrestored commodious leather seating and original carpets combine to create a feeling of nostalgia in those who can remember trips in motor cars before the days of plastic upholstery and rubber mats. The four-door saloon was introduced in 1946, along with a four-seater drop-head coupe on the same chassis. Both vehicles had the 70 brake horsepower overhead valve six-cylinder engine of 2,522 cc, driving through a fluid flywheel and pre-selector epicyclic gearbox and worm drive rear axle. Front suspension was independent with coil springs. Though hardly sporting in appearance, the drophead did provide the freedom of fresh air motoring, and these new models were eagerly awaited by would-be customers who had to queue to buy new cars in those austere post-war days when petrol rationing was still a grim reality. The factory price of the saloon was £925, to which had to be added the iniquitous purchase tax of £257, 4 shillings and 11 pence. This special sports model was added to the range from 1948 to 1953, with body by Barker. "Gentlemen's motoring with a difference," ran the original advertisements. The beautiful and rather rakish body was certainly different, and it made a stylish suit of clothes for the familiar DB18 2.5-litre chassis. The characteristic Daimler line runs alongside the bonnet from the scuttle. The wings and bonnet are of steel. The rest of the body is of aluminium with ash and steel framing. The interior is equipped with all the usual wealth of finely veneered wood and having large white-faced dials with black figures and pointers. The quadrant for the pre-select gear change shows 4 ratios available. The boot has a reasonable amount of luggage space, though it is rather shallow. The panel which covers the spare wheel compartment incorporates the rear number plate, which is hinged out over the rear bumper. It hides a very comprehensive and well-equipped toolkit. With twin SU carburetors and a higher compression ratio for its alloy head, brake horsepower was raised from 70 to 85. Fuel consumption was about 22 miles per gallon. The lines of the car were extremely good, with the hood lowered or raised. The flowing fared-in wing line and fully spatted rear wheels give a graceful sweep to the coachwork. The length of the car was 15 feet and its width 5 feet 4.5 inches. With total weight at over 1.5 tons, the power-to-weight ratio was not especially favorable, but with the overdrive gearbox, which was fitted as standard, an easy 70 miles per hour was possible at 2,000 revs per minute, and a top speed in the mid-80s. Also built on the DB18 Special Series chassis was this exotic drop-head 4-seat touring car. Of the 500 special chassis, 400 were supplied with the Barker body, which we have just seen. Just under 100 became the Empress saloons. About 6 drop-heads, of which this is one, were built by Hooper to the individual order of exalted clients. This particular vehicle is believed to have been made to the requirements of King Farouk of Egypt, but it was never delivered to him as he was deposed before the order was completed. This is the famous Hooper Empress line, which emphasized a single front wing sweep carried through to the rear, which ignored the presence of the rear wheel as a styling feature. The two-tone paint emphasizes the elegance of the coachwork and suits the semi-razor edge styling to perfection. The interior is luxuriously upholstered in the finest hide with contrasting dark green piping. Deep piled Wilton carpeting covers the floor. The woodwork has not the usual walnut veneer, but is carried out in pale Australian camphor wood with a richly figured grain. Sumptuous rear seating in armchair comfort has been achieved by adding a few inches to the length of the chassis. This contrasts with the seating arrangement in the Barker body, where the shorter space behind the front seats could be used as an extra luggage compartment or as an occasional removable side-facing seat for a third person. In a full four-seater, of course, rear quarter lights are a necessity, and saloon car comfort is provided by an interior lamp, an ashtray, and a winding window. Smooth-running, electrically operated window lifts are controlled by buttons in each door capping, which may be operated by driver or passenger. Miniature roller blinds in place of sun visors are refinements not often found on soft tops. The amazing precision and coordination, a metal panel in the rear deck allows the electrically operated hood to rise or descend, accompanied by the whirring of servos and gearing mechanisms. What a luxury to be able to control weather protection without moving from the driver's seat. In fact, much of the fascination of this very desirable motor car lies in its mixture of the traditional qualities of its lineage and features which for its time were the last word in modernity and convenience. A drive in a Daimler. It was interesting to see how this large car handles on present-day roads. Surprisingly, perhaps, it is easier to drive than the Barker Special Sports. Because the body is all aluminium, it is lighter, and the car feels more lively. The steering is lower geared, and the effort of cornering is reduced, though the turning circle is all of 42 feet. The car warms up more quickly also, as thermostatically operated radiator blinds come into operation when starting from cold. Front suspension is independent by coil spring and double wishbone, and at the rear half-elliptic springs and hydraulic dampers. This gives a very comfortable ride and good handling. Steering and running gear usually have a long life and give good service because these cars were fitted with the Auto-Lube chassis lubrication system. Oil is pumped around a system of pipes by a device which is situated near the exhaust manifold and activated by changes in temperature. The car has the Girling hydromechanical braking system, whereby the front brakes are hydraulically operated and the rear brakes mechanically operated by rods. It is a reasonably good system, though correct maintenance is essential if the car is to keep its dignified road manners. This particular car has always been well cared for and meticulously serviced, so that we are looking at original splendor. As it drives majestically through the lanes and leafy suburbs, it is a tribute to its famous manufacturer. A fine partnership between the indisputable quality of Daimler mechanical components and the flair of Hooper's styling. Every inch of it proclaims its bespoke origins, and wherever these superbly produced cars went, they were ambassadors for British craftsmanship. Based on the same sturdy chassis, with massive cruciform bracing, and powered by the same 2,522cc engine in a lower state of tune, this consort saloon looks rather more stolid. Nevertheless, with its curved radiator grille, faired-in headlights and side lights, as well as its new style V-section bumpers, it looked very modern when first introduced in 1949. The worm drive of the old DB18 saloon had been replaced by a high-point bevel final drive, and hydro-mechanical brakes had replaced the cable-operated ones of the earlier model. The interior is little changed from the DB18, which we saw earlier, though furnishings and fittings are obviously to the same high standards. Touches like these recessed rears to the front seats, which gave legroom and provided footrests, kept customers loyal, as did the armrests and door pockets. This new model, the Conquest, was announced in 1953. It was 5 inches shorter than the Consort, was 300 weight lighter, and its new, near-square, short-stroke, 6-cylinder engine produced 5 brake horsepower more. It cost £140 less than the Consort, and its name was an historical pun on the original price minus purchase tax of £1,066, that is 1066, the year of the Norman conquest of Britain. The Conquest Century, made from 1954 to 1958, was a high-performance version of the Conquest with twin carburetors and a higher compression ratio, producing 100 brake horsepower and a top speed of more than 90 miles per hour. The drop-head Conquest Century is here followed by a Conquest drop-head coupe. Both models had larger brakes and a larger diameter propeller shaft than the Conquest, though they shared the same 2,433cc engine.
Daimler's sporting image, fresh air and fun. And we're lucky enough today to have 2 fine examples of open-air Daimlers. Mr. Trevor Bethel, this is your motor, I believe.
That's right, Derek.
And it's a Conquest Century.
That's right.
And yet, looking at the 2 motors, I believe that the chassis and engine is the same in both cases.
That's correct, yes.
What is the difference between your car, Trevor, and yours, Peter?
Well, as you say, it's the same chassis, it's the same motive power unit. This one has been lowered to sit inside the chassis more, to give it the lower, sleeker look. There were 2 versions of this made, both known as the DJ254s. The earlier model didn't have the back seat, had ordinary side screen windows. The later version, which is known as the drop-head coupe, but still the DJ254, has the wind-up windows and the small sideways seat in the back.
So they're sisters under the skin.
They're sisters underneath, but totally different on top. Yes.
Is there much difference in performance?
Well, I've never driven both of them. I don't think there's greatly more, but this is considerably, I believe, heavier. I'm not too sure about
it's
that.
considerably heavier.
Yeah.
Half of the back half is aluminium on this one.
Yes.
Although they did...
Aluminium on a wooden frame?
No, aluminium on a steel frame, in fact.
And what is the construction of your car, Trevor?
Well, very conventional, actually. It's all steel. Really, it was a drop-head coupe made out from the saloon in many ways. I mean,
Yes.
it really is,
The same luxurious interior,
right,
the same walnut.
Real hide seating. On the more sporty version, they had enough sense to put the vinyl
leather.
cover. And,
That's fine.
No, it's
It's leather,
That
of
is
course.
leather.
Of course, it would
I'm
be leather.
afraid.
But it is a departure for Daimler, I think.
I
then.
think it is. I don't think there was a Daimler built with a leather-coloured dashboard.
I see.
Before this one.
It's a great pleasure to talk to you, gentlemen. I hope you enjoy your cars for many years to come.
Oh, I'm
Thank
sure
you
it
very
will.
much.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Yes.
The traditional fluted radiator grille stands proud and unchanging. And with a touch of old world courtesy to match its well-bred image, the Conquest Century glides away. To be followed by a Daimler different from the Century Coupe, a two-seater sports car built for performance and high-speed handling. The radiator grille has become wider and more shallow than that of any preceding model. Lower and sleeker than the coupe, the most svelte Daimler ever designed, with a two-door body made of self-coloured fiberglass, and in 1959 costing a very reasonable £1,395. The nose of the car has a purposeful and almost aggressive forward thrust. I spoke to Mr. Duncan Saunders, who owns this totally original 1963 model.
Did Daimlers produce many of these cars?
They produced 2,500 in total, half of which were exported, mostly to the United States. So you can say that there are probably about 1,100 left in this country.
I see. And this is properly called the SP250.
Yes, it was called the Dart through a competition very early on, but then an American company found out that there was that Daimler were using a name that they were using, so it had to be dropped.
I see. And it has a V8 engine.
2.5 litre.
Designed by the famous Edward Turner from BSA.
That's right, based very much on his motorcycle experience and developed from the motorcycle engine of the Triumph name.
I think you said to me earlier it was like 4 motorcycle engines put together.
Yes, very similar. And it's beautifully smooth. It's often been described as a turbine, which it is. It's extremely flexible. You can drive in top gear from 5 miles an hour up to 125 miles an hour.
125 miles an hour?
Yes, that's its top speed.
Splendid.
With a 0 to 60 in 8.2 seconds.
May you long continue to astonish the modern traffic.
Thank you very much.
Daimler's top-of-the-range challenge to Rolls-Royce took the form of the magnificent DE36 limousine. Its straight-eight 5,460cc engine produced 150 brake horsepower, and on its massive chassis, some of the greatest coach builders of the immediate post-war period created luxurious prestige vehicles. Freestone and Webb, Tickford, Windover, Barker and Hooper all used the DE36 as a basis to display their art. This 1952 example is by Hooper, who had in 1947 produced a very similar vehicle for George VI.
The original body was designed by a man named Rivers, who was the chief designer for Hooper. He designed these cars, and there were about 200 of them made between 1948 and about 52.
Yes.
And the interiors were really to the choice of the purchaser.
And I noticed that the boot had a let-down lid.
Yes.
What was that for?
That is in case if the let-down lid is left in the down position, there is also another interior seal plate, which when that is locked is completely waterproof, and it is then possible to fill the entire inside of the boot up with the ordinary luggage, and if by any chance you have a cabin trunk, that can be covered and carried on that let-down lid.
En route to the Queen Elizabeth or the QE2, presumably?
Oh, yes, yes.
The limousine shown here was made to the special order of Lord Beaverbrook, the newspaper magnate. This car has a wheelbase of 12 feet 3 inches and has semi-razor edge styling. As this was a touring limousine, the twin spare wheels are side-mounted to give space in the boot for great quantities of luggage. It was on this DE36 chassis that the then chairman of Daimler, Sir Bernard Docker, and his wife Lady Nora, had created for them the spectacular and opulent Green Goddess cars. Looking absolutely stunning in black and pearl, this 1957 Empress Mark III is the last of the 14 Mark IIIs produced by Hooper on the 3.5-litre Regency chassis. Its 107 brake horsepower would power this comparatively light coach-built saloon to speeds of more than 90 miles per hour. The two-tone Green Empress was made in 1953 and is a Mark II model with a 3-litre engine. The BSA Daimler concern had acquired Hoopers in the 30s, and this famous coach building house closed its doors finally in 1959.
Mr. Ramage, yours is the earlier car, I think.
Yes, mine dates from 1953, but the model is part of a series which can be traced back to the late 30s, the DB 17 or 18, which continued with substantially the same chassis up to the V8 Majestic Major, which is the last all-Daimler car made under Daimler ownership.
I see. And yet bodywork is so distinctive. Is this what we have come to know as the Empress line?
Yes, the Empress came out in about 1948 on the 2.5-litre body with a slightly heavier looking body, basically the same size, but only 4 windows, not 6.
I see. And this is a razor edge saloon?
Razor edge saloon, and similar style was applied on bigger Daimlers and Rolls Royces and Bentleys, but these are the Empresses. Others are Empress style.
And would these be bespoke bodies?
No. Hooper's made these as a small-scale series production, as opposed to the one-off.
I see.
I think after the war, there was still a large number of coach builders making cars to order, but they realized financial conditions had changed, and so there's a trend towards making series of semi-standardized bodies, and this was Hooper's side of it.
I see. Well, thank you very much indeed, Roderick. And looking at your example, yours is a later example, Malcolm, isn't it? 1957.
That is correct, yes. Mine is a 1957. It happens, in fact, to be the very last Daimler Empress made, and in fact differs from this lovely model here insofar as it has a slightly larger engine, namely 3.5-litre, whereas the green, two-tone green model here has, in fact, a 3-litre engine.
I see. I must ask you, gentlemen, these are big engines for big cars. Is the petrol consumption not prohibitive?
Mine's appalling.
Are these pressed steel bodies or panelled on frame?
These are panelled on frame, in fact. It's an ash frame panelled with aluminium, so the bodies are, in many ways, fairly delicate.
Craftsmanship before presswork took over and abolished it.
But there's a combination, I think, of the pre-war tradition of the way of making cars,
yes,
but with relatively modern conveniences.
Yes.
There is a more modern trend to it in that there are aluminium pillars in it. The A and B, this pillar, the pillar up the side of the door,
yes,
are aluminium castings machined with wood inserts where they are joined to other parts.
I see.
So it's not all ash as the pre-war ones would have been.
I see. Enviable motor cars, gentlemen. If one had to choose between one of them, what a dreadful and difficult choice that would be to make. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you very much.
You.
The Majestic, introduced in 1958 with a 3.8-litre engine producing 147 brake horsepower. It is a car with presence and power. It was continued from 1959 as the Majestic Major, with a 4.5-litre V8 engine designed by Edward Turner. Four-wheel disc brakes were new, and even the traditional Daimler fluid flywheel was replaced by a Borg-Warner automatic box on this, the last true Daimler.
Looking at this elegant Mark II body shape, you might think that this car is a Jaguar. Well, you would be wrong. This is a Daimler 250 V8. It belongs to Mr. Colin Nicholson. I believe, Colin, it isn't properly called a 250 V8.
No, the later ones were called the V8 250, but these earlier ones, and this is an earlier model, were in fact called the Daimler 2.5-litre V8 Saloon.
I see, and yet the body is very much like the Jaguar body.
Very much, yes. It is in fact a design by Jaguar, which was continued under the Daimler mark after the Jaguar and Daimler merger.
I wonder why they had the two names. Could it possibly be that people who liked Daimlers, had been Daimler clients, thought that the Jaguar image was rather too flashy?
Yes, I think that's probably right. It was Jaguar always had a racy image, and I think people that considered or wanted a more sedate motor car, like the Daimler Mark.
I think
very
that's
historical.
true. Sedate and civilized.
I think that's probably right, yes.
And I believe you won an award with this particular car.
Yes, this car, in fact, at the 1986 Daimler and Lanchester Owners Club National Rally, won the best Daimler V8 of that year.
A great honour. And did you buy it in this condition?
No, it was, I suppose, best described when I bought it as sound but shoddy. Needed quite a bit of coachwork restoration. That was done in 1983, but apart from that, the car is totally original.
And the interior is original?
The interior is all original, with original seats, carpet, original wood, headlining.
Yes.
The interior, in fact, has not been touched at all.
Even after the purchase by Jaguar of Daimler, this car could be considered still to be a Daimler because of its Turner-designed 2.5-litre V8 engine. The engine fitted neatly into the Mark II body shell, though the sump had to be remodeled to clear the Jaguar suspension geometry. Initially, the car was offered with automatic transmission only and was really a compact successor to the Conquest. When in 1960, Sir William Lyons bought Daimler for £3,400,000, an era ended. But a new era began, because the name of Daimler lives on, and especially in the executive limousine, with its body styled in the Hooper tradition, it lives up to its past proud reputation.